Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today in my B-Tier guides for Dragon Age Inquisition, I'm going to take you through a build guide for Cassandra Pentaghast, my favorite warrior companion in Inquisition. Cassandra is an aggressive defender of her allies as well as her principles, and so I want her build to reflect that. She will continue to be a sword and shield warrior, as that is the weapon style she prefers from the beginning, but her abilities are going to focus more on running into the fray, taunting all enemies into attacking her, and gaining guard to essentially be an impenetrable shield protecting her allies. As is always the case with my builds, I like to focus more on lore and character-friendly choices rather than the optimal min-maxing ones. For this reason, you'll see that I won't recommend extremely specific or crafted items. Inquisition's crafting system is broken, and if you abuse it to create the most overpowered items, it takes away from the fun and excitement of fighting enemies as well as finding cool new items as part of playing the game. So as part of the recommended gear section, I will give you the main stats I think are good for crafted items, but otherwise I'll also recommend various items that fit Cassandra which you can obtain by playing the game, not by grinding crafting materials. Without further ado, let's get into the build. At level 1, Cassandra starts out with 3 abilities, from the Weapon and Shield tree, Shield Wall and Payback Strike, and from the Vanguard tree, Challenge. Shield Wall is an activated mode that causes the warrior to stand in a defensive position and move more slowly. All front-facing or non-directional attacks are blocked, and the warrior gains some guard based on the potential health they could have lost if they hadn't blocked the attack. The cost of each hit being blocked in stamina is guard percentage gained -1. Performing any other action deactivates Shield Wall. You can also toggle this stance off to conserve stamina. I don't recommend this ability because it's annoying to use and the AI by itself doesn't seem to know when and how to use it. Since my builds are geared towards more relaxed playstyles, I am assuming you don't want to micromanage your party members during every single fight, and Shield Wall is in my opinion an ability best used directly by the player. There are also only 8 active ability slots, and I don't think this one is worth taking up the space. Payback Strike is an ability that allows the warrior to recover from the stun, panic, knockdown, and chill conditions, and lash out with a blow against nearby enemies. If the warrior was damaged in the last 5 seconds, they also get a damage bonus of 200% to the strike. This can help the warrior recover from disabling conditions, but I'm skeptical about whether the AI knows how to properly use this. I think it's a very useful ability, but you may have to switch over to Cassandra just for a second if you see her affected by one of those conditions in order to use Payback Strike to get her back in the fight. If you don't think Cass uses this well, or you prefer her to have something more generally useful, then I recommend respecializing her and ignoring the passive under this, Turn the Bolt, and use the extra points to unlock either Livid or Charging Bull from the Vanguard tree. Finally, Challenge is one of my favorite abilities. The warrior shouts, taunting a targeted enemy and gaining 10% guard. This is an ability that Cassandra should use a lot as the party's main tank, so that enemies focus on her instead of on her squishier allies. The fact that it grants guard also makes it very important, as gaining guard is the key to keeping your tank healthy and able to keep taking more hits. As a note for newer players, guard is essentially an extra HP bar you get on top of the character's regular HP, which protects the character from taking health damage. You can build up guard through various abilities and effects, mostly from warrior abilities, though there are also some items that can grant guard on hit. As my build focuses on making Cassandra into a tank who can take care of business with minimal if any interference from the player, the abilities I chose focus mainly on 2 things. 1. Taunting enemies to keep them from attacking allies, and 2. Keeping Cassandra tanky enough with guard to be able to take all the hits. As a third, less important point, buffs to allies and debuffs on enemies are great, but you will see that those make up very little of her full kit. Let's go through which abilities and upgrades I recommend. I will mention them in a few categories based on the level ranges I think they should be unlocked at: early, mid, late, and super late. As a note, you don't need to force yourself to do a million side quests or grind respawning enemies to reach the max level 27. A character's power in Inquisition comes from gear, as well as the strategic combination of a few key abilities. And anyway, if you're playing through all the DLCs, you should be able to reach quite a high level. If you find you're constantly out-leveling enemies, I recommend switching on the Even Ground trial, which causes all enemies to scale to be at least the same level as the Inquisitor. Let's start with what I recommend for the early game, until level 7, or that time when you waste too much time in the hinterlands while the breach threatens to swallow the entire world. I recommend first and foremost focusing on the Vanguard tree in order to get Cassandra extra guard as well as increase her taunting capabilities, unlock Warcry, upgrade it with Battle Roar, upgrade Challenge with Call Them Out, and pick up the Untouchable defense passive. Warcry causes the warrior to taunt all nearby enemies, gaining 20% guard for each enemy affected. The guard generation on this is really good, especially when you're fighting multiple melee enemies and your squishies are in danger of being swarmed. Fear not, Cassandra will taunt everyone nearby and fill her guard up so she can tank their hits without issue. Battle Roar is the upgrade for Warcry I recommend. It increases the area of effect to 10 meters and adds a bonus 4 seconds to the duration of the taunt. The Call Them Out upgrade for Challenge makes Challenge no longer have a cooldown, so Cassandra can much more effectively taunt enemies whenever she needs to. Get the Untouchable Defense passive, which gives Cassandra a bonus of 25% to her maximum guard, as well as +3 Constitution. The more maximum guard she can stack, the more unkillable she gets, so any max guard bonuses are welcome. For the final 2 points in this category, I recommend unlocking 2 abilities from the Weapon and Shield tree, Bear Mauls the Wolves and Shield Bash. Bear Mauls the Wolves is a passive that gives the warrior +3 Constitution and makes all flanking damage received, aka in a cone behind the warrior, be reduced to 1. Shield Bash is an ability that makes a warrior slam their shield into an enemy brutally, causing huge damage against an enemy's guard. This is a great ability to have because enemies with guard are very annoying to fight, and you can essentially destroy all of their guard or take out a huge portion of it with Shield Bash. Let's move on to the mid-game abilities, or from level 8 to 15. You'll be doing all sorts of heroics during this time, so we need Cassandra to beef up. From the Weapon and Shield tree, we're going to get 2 useful passives, Turn the Blade and Turn the Bolt. Turn the Blade reduces all damage coming from the front by 20%, as well as providing a +3 to Constitution. Turn the Bolt reduces the damage received from ranged attacks from the front by 50%, as well as providing a +3 to Constitution. From the Vanguard tree, we'll get 2 passives on the right side of the tree in order to be able to unlock Bodyguard later on, Trust the Steel and Cutting Words. Trust the Steel gives the warrior a 20% bonus to armor while they have guard active, as well as +3 Constitution. Seeing as Cassandra should have guard up pretty much all the time, this means she gets a 20% bonus to armor at all times, which is great. Cutting Words causes the entire party to do 20% more damage to taunted targets, as well as providing the warrior with +3 strength. Party-wide buffs are always great, and this ability is even better than the Mark of Death ability from Dragon Age Origins, which allowed the rogue to mark one target that the whole party did extra damage to. This one causes all taunted enemies to take more damage. Very powerful. Now, at this point, you'll have reached level 11, which means you get access to specialization abilities. Cassandra has access to the Templar specialization due to being a Seeker of Truth. First off, I don't recommend using Blessed Blades. Cassandra uses this on her own in such weird moments and places it in the worst positions that if I have it unlocked, I just disable it in her tactics. It's not as good as it sounds, just 15% bonus damage versus demons, and possibly magic users later on, only while you're standing in that little circle. Spell Purge, on the other hand, is very useful either when fighting mages or when dealing with rifts. It causes all hostile magic to be dispelled in an area around the warrior. It can be used to dispel enemy barriers, get rid of ice or fire mines on the ground, as well as prevent the summoning of a demon from a rift if you cast it near one of those green pulsing things, which are apparently called rupture points. The more you know. The upgrade I recommend for Spell Purge is Annulment, which makes all of the warrior's Templar abilities that normally affect only demons to also affect magic-using enemies such as Spellbinders and Mages, Undead, Red Templar Horrors, Shadow, Knights, and Behemoths. This is great due to the next ability you can unlock on the right side of the Templar tree. Champions of the Just is a passive that grants plus 10% damage versus demons for the entire party, as well as plus 3 strength for the warrior. With the Annulment passive from Spell Purge, this passive grants a plus 10% damage bonus for the entire party against demons and all magic-using enemies like the ones I mentioned above, which are the majority of enemy types you'll face throughout the game. Finally, going back to the Vanguard tree, I recommend unlocking Bodyguard. It's an activated ability that lasts for 15 seconds and causes 50% of the damage dealt to any party members to be dealt to the warrior instead. The cooldown for it is essentially 9 seconds because it begins as soon as the ability is cast, so even without cooldown reduction, only 9 seconds of downtime between uses of Bodyguard is great. Do note that the damage to party members won't be transferred if the effect applies damage over time. Now we reach the endgame, from level 16 to 23. The upgrade I recommend for Bodyguard is over here. It causes the warrior to taunt any enemies that attack an ally in Bodyguard's area of effect. It's imperative that if a squishy ally is being targeted, Cassandra can taunt the enemy as quickly as possible. She can of course use some of her other taunting abilities such as Challenge or Warcry, but having an extra source of taunt is always better. Next, I recommend a little detour into the Battlemaster tree for two great abilities that will be quite useful in the late game as enemies get tougher to deal with. Grappling Chain drags an opponent into melee range with the warrior. While this isn't a taunt per se, it certainly has the effect of quickly removing an enemy that was possibly attacking one of your squishy allies, and so for this reason, I think it's a powerful ability. The next two passives, Crippling Blows and Coup de Grace, aren't necessarily the most useful thing, but they give you access to the other great activated ability from the Battlemaster tree, Horn of Valor. Crippling Blows causes the warrior's crits make the enemies deal 15% less damage and also gives a +3 strength bonus. The damage reduction stacks if the warrior manages to deal more crits, but of course that's not what this build is about. Still, a good effect if Cass manages to proc it. Coup de Grace makes the warrior deal 30% more damage to enemies that are stunned or knocked down and also grants +3 strength. This is a great bonus to activate if you have other party members that can easily stun or knock down enemies with their spells or martial abilities. The star of the show, Horn of Valor, blasts a sound across the battlefield, increasing the whole party's damage and armor by 15% for 10 seconds. It's a great party-wide buff, so it offers great utility already, but there's more. The upgrade I recommend for it, Fortifying Blast, now causes all members of the party to gain 10% guard each time they deal damage. This is huge, as it can ensure that even your squishier party members have a bit more of a buffer on top of their health bar to stay alive. After unlocking this, you'll notice that you have 8 active abilities that I recommend using. Payback Strike, which was unlocked by default and is Cassandra's Get Out of Disabling Effects free card, Shield Bash, which is the Guard Destroyer, Warcry and Challenge, which are the main taunting abilities, Spell Purge, which can deal with barriers, magic mines, and new demon waves from rifts, Bodyguard, which protects allies by having Cassandra tank half of the damage they take, Grappling Chain, which offers yet another way to quickly get an enemy away from one of your allies, and finally, Horn of Valor, which gives the party damage and armor buffs and allows them to build up some guard once upgraded. From now on, I'll mainly be recommending passives and upgrades since you already have good active abilities. I thought about changing up the build a bit to include the Templar Wrath of Heaven ability, but I don't necessarily see Cassandra using something quite so flashy and damaging, seeing as she's much more focused on being a defender. For your final 2 late game points, I recommend getting 2 more passives in the Battlemaster tree, Hamstring and Deep Reserves. Hamstring reduces an enemy's speed by 50% if the warrior hits them from behind, and grants +3 strength. Deep Reserves is the more important passive because it grants a bonus of +50% stamina regeneration when the warrior's stamina is below 50%, and grants +3 strength. The stamina regen is very useful so that Cassandra can spam her taunting and guard building abilities as much as possible. Finally, we get into the super late game, aka levels 24 to 27. From the Battlemaster tree, I recommend upgrading Grappling Chain with Give Them the Boot, which makes the warrior kick the enemy, dealing 200% weapon damage and stunning them for 3 seconds. This synergizes well with dealing extra damage to enemies while they're knocked down or stunned passive, as well as helping your allies more easily dispatch an enemy disabled in this way. Plus, I think it's very funny to see Cassandra kicking an enemy. From the Vanguard tree, unlock the It'll Cost You passive, which causes an enemy attacking Cassandra to get damaged for 50% of the damage they inflict, and also grants Cass a +3 to strength. Finally, you can upgrade Shield Bash with the Ring the Bell passive, which gives the ability even more of a bonus versus guard, or if you feel that Shield Bash is doing its job well enough, you can upgrade Payback Strike with the Cruel Revenge passive that causes it to taunt enemies for 8 seconds. I think you already have enough sources of taunt and yoinking enemies away from your party, and I also think Shield Bash is just fine without the upgrade. In all honesty, you don't need any of these upgrades or passives that I mentioned in the super late game category because I purposefully left them for last, knowing that it can be difficult to reach max level, and I didn't want players to feel like they're missing out on something just because they aren't 100%ing the game. If you want to craft gear for Cassandra, the main defensive stats I would focus on are maximum health or constitution, guard on hit, though this is only available through certain masterworking materials, I believe, high base armor values for armor pieces, and magic defense, melee defense, and ranged defense. I would absolutely value higher armor and max health more than the defenses, because armor reduces any damage you take by a certain amount, and health lets you be able to take more hits in general, whereas the specific types of defenses or the elemental resistances are only useful against a specific type of attack or element. I do think that melee, magic, and ranged defense are slightly more general than the elemental resistances though, so that's why I recommend them as a stat. For offensive stats, I would focus on attack, strength, and either stagger on hit or sunder on hit. Stagger is the chance to stun the target, and sunder reduces the target's armor. These last two are more for utility, so Cassandra as a tank can help her teammates more easily kill enemies. These are, of course, general recommendations. If you want to craft specific gear in order to fight a particular boss, such as a dragon that's giving you a hard time, then focus on defenses against the types of attacks and damage that the enemy in question deals. For example, against the high dragon in the hinterlands, you could craft some gear with high fire resistance for Cassandra. Though again, if her guard, armor, and health are good, she should be fine, and if you're having trouble, you might just be underleveled. Now let's talk about some specific items you can find while playing the game, which should be good on Cassandra. I won't mention common items as you'll find them useless once you start finding rares. I won't mention items you get from DLCs or items that are very difficult to acquire, since I want to make this build as casual friendly as possible. If you don't like these items in particular, it's good to look at their stats and try to find some other things that are similar. Starting with weapons, you could use any one-handed weapon, though Cassandra seems to favor a blade considering her starting gear. I recommend either a sword or a mace due to the fact that axes don't seem to have very good bonuses for a tank. Here are some swords I recommend. A good starting sword would be the Mercenary Lord Blade. It requires level 4 and can be either purchased from the Crossroads Merchant in the Hinterlands or looted from a corpse as part of the Blood Brothers side quest in the Hinterlands. You can upgrade it with a grip as well as a rune. It has plus 4% armor penetration and attack. The Swedish Fingers is a very easy to acquire unique sword that requires level 7, grants plus 3% attack, plus 3% crit damage bonus, plus 2% sunder on hit, and has a grip and rune slot which you can fill. You loot this from the Elite Templar Knight encountered in the Templar encampment as part of the side quest Templars to the West in the Hinterlands. Serrated Kunari Blade requires level 7, grants plus 20 damage versus living from a corrupting rune, plus 7% attack, and 3 guard on hit. It is found as rare random loot. The Emperor Guard Blade requires level 18 and grants plus 20% attack and plus 30 maximum guard. It can be purchased from the Suladin Keep Merchant in Emprise du Lion. The Dwarven Longsword is a rare sword that requires level 19, grants plus 34% armor penetration and plus 30 maximum guard, as well as plus 3 guard on hit. It also has a rune slot. It can be found as random loot from tier 3 chests. Here are some good maces. Dwarven Crusher requires level 18 and grants plus 20 strength, and on kill, the target explodes for 75% weapon damage. It has a haft and rune slot and can be looted from tier 3 chests. Vidathis is a unique mace that requires level 6 and grants plus 20 damage versus demons, plus 7% armor penetration, plus 2 strength, and has a haft slot. You can loot it from Lord Lucius Corrin in the castle of Caer Oswin during Cassandra's personal quest Promise of Destruction. If you want to craft Cassandra a weapon, I would recommend using a schematic that feels like it's a weapon she would use. A Templar mace, a thrusting longsword, an arming sword, or a wide blade sword are some examples. Pair the schematic with the good offensive stats I mentioned earlier, plus guard on hit if you have the masterwork material to do so, and you should be all good. Remember that you can also craft upgrades for weapons in the forms of grifts, hafts, pommels, and later on runes, so be sure to look at the weapon you crafted and see what kind of upgrade slots it has. Let's move on to shields. The best early game shield is Schaefer's Rampart, a unique shield that requires level 3 and grants plus 2 constitution, plus 30% front defense, plus 3% melee defense, plus 2% stagger on being hit, and 10% chance to grant 5 seconds of Horn of Valor. It can be looted from the Storm Coast in a chest found in an unmarked dwarven mine located east of the Hessarian camp. Due to its bonuses, low level requirement, as well as the ease of obtaining it, this is a very good shield for the early game and even mid game if you don't want to do crafting. The fact that it gives you access early to Horn of Valor, while Cassandra doesn't yet have it as an activated ability, is awesome. It's going to be less good once Cassandra has Horn of Valor herself, but it's a very solid shield until then. Estwatch Guard is a unique shield that requires level 12 and grants plus 30% front defense, plus 3% magic and melee defense, plus 6% range defense, and 3 guard on hit. It's looted from the Revenant located in the final room of the Tomb of the Emerald Knight in the Emerald Graves as part of the side quest, The Knight's Tomb. Masterwork or Legion Shield requires level 14 and grants plus 4 constitution, plus 30% front defense, and plus 20 maximum guard. It's found as random loot. Mage Hunter is a unique shield that requires level 17 and grants plus 30% front defense, plus 12% magic defense, plus 8% spirit resistance, and 3 guard on hit. It can be purchased from Bonnie Sims in Skyhold. As you can see, most of the shields I recommend either have guard on hit, bonus to maximum guard, or some other useful abilities such as the Horn of Valor bonus from Schaefer's Rampart. If you want to craft your own shield, I once again suggest choosing a type of shield that Cassandra herself would be likely to use, such as a Polished Shield, Noble Shield, Templar Shield, Masterwork Seeker Shield, or something similar. Focus on the good defensive stats I mentioned, such as Guard on Hit, Maximum Guard, Maximum Health or Constitution, and Melee, Ranged, and Magic Defense. Of course, you may not be able to fit everything on one shield. Guard and health bonuses are, in my opinion, more important than the other defenses, as I previously mentioned. In terms of armor, Cassandra is a warrior, so she wears heavy armor. From quite early on, you'll likely find a lot of rare heavy armors with Defender, Battlemaster, or Vanguard in the name. Those are all decent armors and can be upgraded with gloves and boots to make them even better. Unless Cassandra is using crafted armor or unique armor, then I recommend being on the lookout for higher level rare armors of this kind because they have higher base armor scores. In terms of unique armors, there are a few standouts. Masterwork Vanguard Armor is a good early game unique armor that requires level 8, grants plus 3% heal bonus, melee defense and range defense, and plus 10 max stamina. It has arms and legs upgrade slots available, and it can be looted from the mercenary leader in the Grand Forest Villa in the Hinterlands as part of the side quest The Mercenary Fortress. Masterwork Vanguard Male requires level 10 and grants plus 3% magic defense, plus 40 maximum health, plus 3% melee defense, and 2 guard on hit. It can be looted from a chest at the top of the Shimmerstone Mine in the Western Approach. Armor of the Knights Divine requires level 16 and can only be worn by a human warrior. It grants magic defense, maximum health, spirit resistance, and abilities cost 7.5% less stamina. I didn't mention the exact other stats because they can be different depending on whether you have the Trespasser DLC installed or not. It can be looted from the Sandy Howler High Dragon in the Hissing Wastes. If you want to craft armor, then I of course recommend focusing on the main defensive stats like maximum guard, guard on hit, maximum health or constitution, and then either the 3 defenses or some strength in combination with constitution so that you can increase Cassandra's damage some more as well. For gloves and boots, I always like to put as much maximum health on them as possible. When it comes to helmets, they're all so ugly. In all honesty, since I hate helmets in this game for how terrible they look, just follow my main advice on the types of stats you're looking for. Better yet, here is a category where I absolutely endorse crafting, just so that you can choose the least offensive looking helmet and give it the stats you want. Of course, the Ardent Blossom Flower Crown looks great, and its plus 24% Sunder when hit stats are quite good, seeing as Cassandra plans on getting hit a lot by enemies. But it's quite hard to obtain it, so just use whatever you can that's not terrible. Moving on to accessories. For belts, it's very simple. You either want a belt of health or a guard belt. You can find either common versions of these or rare versions that are enhanced. You can get a common belt of health either as random loot or purchase one from Barnabas in Val Royeaux. You can find a common guard belt as random loot or purchase one from Barnabas in Val Royeaux or from the Caer Brunnock merchant in Crestwood. The enhanced belt of health can be most easily looted from the mercenary leader in the Grand Forest Villa as part of the side quest The Mercenary Fortress in the Hinterlands, but it can also be found as random loot or as a reward for completing the Contact Hero Ferelden War Table operation with Liliana. The enhanced guard belt can be looted from the Northern Hunter High Dragon in Crestwood, can be purchased at the Griffin Wing Keep Merchant in the Western Approach, or can also be found as random loot. For unique belts, I essentially recommend the unique versions of these two belts. The Superb Belt of Health is rewarded upon completion of the Emerald Grave side quest map of Watcher's Pass. Belt of Life is available at Emporium's Weapons and Accessories, one of the stalls in the Black Emporium. Superior Guard Belt can be looted in Emprise du Lion from the Highland Ravager High Dragon. For amulets, I recommend either amulets of cooldown, strength, constitution, or stamina. A cooldown or enhanced cooldown amulet would be the best so that Cassandra can use her taunting and guard generating abilities more often. Other than from random loot, you can purchase a common cooldown amulet from the Caer Brunnock merchant in Crestwood. In terms of unique amulets, this is the best one. Andraste's Sacrifice grants plus 10% cooldown modifier, a chance to hit to taunt all enemies within 8 meters for 4 seconds, and higher stamina regeneration rate. It can be looted from a chest in Villa Morel located in the Emerald Graves. As a note, the taunt ability of this amulet also gives the wearer guard, similar to the Warcry ability, so it's even better. For rings, the common rings are quite bad, so I only recommend either rare or unique rings. If you find a common ring early on, equip it, but don't stress about it. Some decent rare rings are the ones that enhance various abilities, such as the damage of Shield Bash and the duration of Warcry and later on Horn of Valor. In terms of unique rings, you could get a Superb Ring of Attack, which grants plus 10% attack, and can be looted from a chest within the Dwarven Tomb near the Sand Crags camp during the side quest, the Tomb of Firel in the Hissing Wastes. But really, for a tank like Cassandra, rings aren't necessarily as useful as the other items. The most useful rings, in my opinion, are the ones that enhance abilities or the ones that enhance attack. In terms of what runes to use in Cassandra's weapon, that's really dependent on the main type of enemy you're fighting at that certain point in the game. If you're keen on crafting, you could make Cassandra a weapon for dragon fights that uses a dragon slaying rune, a weapon for red Templar or darkspawn fights that uses a cleansing rune, one for demon or undead fights that uses a demon slaying rune, and one for everything else that uses a corrupting rune. If that sounds too complicated, it certainly does for me, as I'd forget to switch weapons before combat, then I recommend putting a fire rune in Cassandra's weapon. Two enemies that I find particularly dangerous, Despair Demons and Red Templar Knights, are weak to fire damage, as are various beasts and undead. There are some enemies resistant to fire, such as Rage Demons, certain dragons and such, but overall I find fire to be a good bonus damage type to have on melee weapons. Remember that Cassandra isn't a damager on your team, but rather a tank, so it's much more important that she has high defensive stats. So really, you don't need to fret much over what rune she has in her weapon. Fire is fine, but the other elements or damage versus X enemy types are also fine. In terms of which consumables to add to Cassandra's belt, I recommend regeneration potions to keep Cassandra healthy in case she takes too much damage and all of her guard goes away together with a portion of her health bar. As a second option, I recommend using the Rock Armor Tonic because it increases her armor for 30 seconds. The tonic should really only be used in difficult fights such as dragon fights or other boss or elite combat situations. Let's talk about how to use this build in combination with the rest of the team. Since Cassandra is the main tank, she should have the taunting and guard generating abilities set as preferred in her tactics, aka Warcry, Bodyguard, and Horn of Valor. I would set Challenge only to Enabled, only due to the fact that I recommended the upgrade that makes it not have a cooldown, and you don't want Cassandra to spam this without having a chance to use the other important abilities. Shield Bash doesn't need to be used as often, so it can stay simply as enabled. It really only needs to be used against enemies with guard. Grappling Chain is in a similar boat as Shield Bash. It shouldn't need to be used often because Cassandra already has Warcry and Challenge isn't ever on cooldown, but if for some reason you really need an enemy to be dragged into melee range with Cassandra, then you could use this ability yourself. Spell Purge is an ability I'm not sure the AI will use very well, but it has such big value that I had to include it in the build. I would personally disable it for Cassandra's AI and just use it myself whenever I need to. If you see a spellcaster with a huge barrier, have Cassandra walk up to them and use Spell Purge to get rid of it. If there are ice or fire mines on the ground, dispel them with it. And if you're closing a rift, you can stop some demons from spawning in a new wave by using Spell Purge while Cassandra is near the green pulsating things. Spell Purge also has the ability to be used as an Eldritch Detonator on incapacitated enemies for a combo. The best types of enemies to use this against are ones that have the sleep or stunned effects applied on them. If you use it on a sleeping enemy, you get the Nightmare combo, which has a large spirit damage bonus and inflicts panic. If you use it on a stunned enemy, you get the Weakness combo, which causes a large spirit damage bonus as well as inflicting weakness. I can't say much more in terms of tactics because unfortunately Inquisition's tactics just aren't as comprehensive as the ones in Origins and DA2. I would have told you when exactly to set Cassandra to use these abilities, but unfortunately that's not possible, so this is all I've got. In terms of party composition, other than Cassandra, I recommend having at least one mage and one rogue, with the fourth party member being whatever class you'd like. I don't think you need 2 tanks in your party, so if you go for a second warrior, it should be a 2-handed damager. I would also recommend that you have at least 2 ranged characters, whether they're both mages, or a mage and an archer, or 2 archers in the case you want to use a melee knight enchanter. While in Inquisition, there usually aren't as many tight quarters for your melee characters to get stuck in like Origins, there are still plenty of fights where having more ranged characters is ideal, such as when fighting a dragon or other enemies that are hard to reach and can attack from a range. In conclusion, this Cassandra build sets her up to taunt enemies away from her allies and build up a lot of guard to become unkillable. I always use some variation of this build on Cassandra, sometimes without the Battlemaster abilities and getting Livid as well as more Templar abilities, but focusing on the taunt and guard abilities always. I have had Cassandra end up soloing dragons, bears, and other dangerous enemies whenever the whole rest of the team was down, but she was just full guard and had no problem taking revenge on the foes that knocked her allies unconscious. There's all of those memes with Cassandra single-handedly fighting 3 bears at once, and they're true because I've had her get into fights with multiple bears at the same time in more than one playthrough. She is truly a beast of a tank, and a character I love taking along with me in every playthrough. This has been a fun build to make, especially as I tried to figure out how exactly to approach making builds for Inquisition, since it's such a different game from Origins. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this build guide for Cassandra Pentaghast and Dragon Age Inquisition. If you're looking forward to seeing more of my Dragon Age and RPG videos, do remember to subscribe, and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. They really help. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.